Abigail Ross rode slow across the desert plain, the leather of her saddle creaking in rhythm with Dusty's hooves. The horizon burned orange beneath the setting sun, but the ache in her chest burned hotter. She had left everything behind: family who turned their backs, friends who drifted away when times grew lean. All she had now was her horse and the stubborn grit that refused to let her fall. The land stretched wide and empty, a mirror of how she felt inside. Yet in the distance, something caught her eye. She drew closer, studying the sagging roof and half-broken fence. Once, it must have been proud, the kind of ranch where families gathered on the porch and cattle roamed fat across the land. Now it leaned tired, its bones showing through weathered boards. Abigail dismounted, brushing dust from her shirt tied above the waist, and touched the fence. The wood crumbled under her fingers. She felt a pang of kinship with the place. Both had been abandoned, both carried scars. Still, a whisper inside her said this ruin wasn't the end. It could be a beginning, if she dared. The door groaned as she pushed it open, lantern light spilling into shadows. Inside, the ranch smelled of dust, old hay, and silence. Furniture sat broken, a rocking chair tilted on one leg. Cobwebs hung like lace across rafters. Yet beneath the decay, Abigail felt warmth, as if echoes of laughter still lingered in the walls. She set down her saddlebags and ran her hand along the rough table. "You're not done yet," she murmured, as though speaking to the house itself. "Neither am I," Dusty snorted outside, his hooves shifting in the dirt. For the first time in years, she smiled. That night, she built a fire in the crumbling stone hearth, coaxing sparks until flames flickered against the walls. She laid her bedroll in the corner and sat cross-legged, sipping tin-cup coffee. The desert wind howled outside, but in here she felt safe. Lonely, yes, but safe. She pulled out a small journal, its pages filled with sketches of horses, half-written prayers, and thoughts she could never say aloud. By lantern light, she wrote, "Found a place today. Broken, like me. Maybe together we can heal." She closed the book and leaned back, the warmth of fire wrapping her in fragile peace. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of dry earth. Abigail stepped outside, stretching her sore muscles. Sunlight revealed the land in full fenced acres fallen into ruin, a barn with half its roof gone, a water trough long dry. Yet she saw a possibility. "We'll start with you," she said, patting Dusty's neck. She fetched a bucket and scouted for water, her boots crunching across the brittle ground. Behind the barn, she noticed a shallow depression in the dirt. Digging with her hands, she struck stone, a circular rim hidden beneath weeds, a well, forgotten, buried, but still standing. Hope surged through her. It took hours of back-breaking work to clear the stones, her palms blistered and raw. When she lowered the bucket into darkness and pulled, the sound of water sloshing nearly made her weep. She drank deeply, cool liquid easing the desert dryness in her throat. Dusty nickered impatiently, and she filled his trough until he drank greedily. "See, boy," she said, brushing his mane, "this land still has life." That discovery lit a spark in her chest. Where there was water, there could be crops, cattle, a future. For the first time in weeks, Abigail felt not just alive, but renewed. The days grew long with labor. She tore down the remains of broken fences and built new posts from salvaged timber. Dusty hauled beams with patience, his muscles straining as much as hers. At night, Abigail collapsed onto her bedroll, sweat-soaked but satisfied. Every nail she hammered, every weed she pulled, every board she mended, stitched the ranch back together, and, in a way, herself too. Neighbors had left her behind, but this land wouldn't. It asked only for sweat and care, and it gave back purpose. The loneliness still lingered, but it was softened by the steady rhythm of work. One afternoon, while repairing the barn roof, she heard a noise that froze her breath. Not the wind, not Dusty, it was a soft bark. Looking down, she saw a scrappy dog with patchy fur staring up at her. Its ribs showed, its eyes wary. Abigail climbed down slowly, crouching. "Hey there, fella," she whispered. The dog flinched, but didn't run. She set out a scrap of jerky, backing away. The animal devoured it, then sat, tail thumping once. Abigail smiled, tears threatening. "Guess it's not just me who needed a place." By evening, the dog curled near the hearth, no longer alone. With each passing day, the ranch grew less like a ruin and more like a home. Abigail planted a small garden by the well, coaxing beans and corn from the soil. She patched the barn walls until Dusty had shelter again. The dog, she named him Scout, followed her everywhere, barking at coyotes and wagging his tail when she sang to herself while working. Nights were still long, but now the fire crackled with company. She spoke aloud as she worked, not caring if no one answered. "We're doing it," she told Scout one night, scratching his ears. "We're really bringing this place back." But not everyone welcomed her efforts. One morning, as she rode into town for supplies, whispers followed her down the street. A shopkeeper frowned, muttering that she should sell the land and move on. "That ranch is cursed," he warned. "No one keeps it alive for long." Abigail straightened, her eyes hard. Maybe no one had enough backbone before. She loaded flour and nails, ignoring the stares. She had known rejection her whole life by family, by so-called friends. It stung, but it no longer defined her. She rode home stronger, her determination harder than any curse could ever be. Storm clouds rolled across the desert days later, thunder shaking the barn walls, rain poured in sheets, drenching the earth, filling the well to its brim. Abigail ran outside laughing, arms outstretched, her shirt clinging to her skin. Dusty pranced, Scout barked, and together they reveled in the storm. The next morning, she walked the land, heart swelling at the sight of fresh shoots sprouting where seeds had been planted. The ranch was alive again, and so was she. Each drop of rain had washed away despair, leaving behind hope that couldn't be drowned. For the first time, she belonged. That night she sat by the fire, Scout snoring at her feet, Dusty sheltered in the barn. She opened her journal and wrote, "The land breathes again. Maybe I do too." She paused, pen hovering. "It isn't easy. It may never be. But this ranch gives me purpose, and purpose is worth every blister and every lonely night." Closing the journal, she leaned back, watching sparks rise into the chimney. The house no longer felt hollow. Its silence was now filled with warmth, and the shadows no longer frightened her. She had claimed this place, and in turn, it had claimed her. The following weeks tested her resolve. Coyotes prowled at night, forcing her to set traps and keep Scout close. A fence collapsed in the wind, and she rebuilt it with aching arms. But each challenge only made her more determined. The ranch was not easy, but it was hers. Each sunrise brought new work. Each sunset brought proof of progress. Dusty grew fat on grass sprouting fresh from rain. Scout's coat began to shine, and the garden thrived. Abigail often stood at the porch, hands on her hips, surveying the land with pride. "Not cursed," she whispered, "just waiting for love." Sometimes loneliness pressed hard, especially when she passed families in town, laughter spilling from porches. But when she returned to her ranch, Scout bounding and Dusty neighing and greeting, she felt a family of her own. They didn't speak words, but their loyalty was louder than any. The house seemed to know it too, its walls creaking less, its windows catching sunlight like smiles. Abigail realized she no longer needed the approval of others. She had carved her place from ruin, turned despair into shelter. The desert had given her a test. and she had answered with grit and heart. One evening, while mending a saddle, she discovered a hidden compartment in the old barn wall. Inside lay a box, weathered but intact. She opened it carefully and found tools, seeds, and a journal belonging to the ranch's first owner. The words spoke of hardships, of love for the land, of dreams never realized. Abigail's chest tightened. "You tried," she whispered to the pages. "Now I'll carry it on." She planted the seeds the next morning, tears stinging her eyes as she covered them with soil. She wasn't just fixing a ranch, she was continuing a story left unfinished. As the sun dipped low, Abigail sat on the porch. Scout curled at her feet, Dusty grazing nearby. The sky blazed red and gold, painting the land she had revived. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was drifting. She felt rooted, strong. She tipped her hat back and whispered, "This is home." The word tasted sweet, a promise kept. Tomorrow would bring more work, more struggle, but tonight was enough. The ranch breathed with her, alive again, no longer a ruin but a sanctuary. And deep inside, Abigail knew she had finally found her destiny. At dawn, Abigail Ross woke to the low hum of bees over squash blossoms and the comforting creak of the porch boards beneath her boots. The ranch looked almost new. Fences stood straight, the barn no longer leaked, and Dusty tossed his shining mane while Scout patrolled the fence line. Daniel filled buckets at the well, pretending not to watch her for approval. She felt pride and fear nibbling its edge. Good things drew envy out here. A curl of dust far off on the road reminded her peace was a visitor, not a tenant. She breathed, squared her shoulders. By noon, a scar of wagon tracks cut across her north pasture, fresh grooves biting the soil. Abigail saddled Dusty, left Daniel stacking wood, and rode to meet whoever thought lines on a map outweighed sweat in the ground. 2 men waited at the gate, smug as coyotes near a trash fire. Their hats shadowed sharp smiles. "We represent buyers," the taller one said. "Fair price, quick papers." She shook her head. "Not selling." Their smiles thinned. "Folks say this place is cursed. Folks are lazy." She watched their eyes harden, memorized the smell of their horses, and turned away. That evening, a wind came up, mean and dry, scraping the eaves like fingernails. Abigail and Daniel walked the fence with lanterns, checking wire, speaking little. Scout ranged ahead, a streak of intent in the dark. When they returned, something white fluttered on the porch nail. A folded note. "Sell or burn." Daniel's face drained. Abigail tucked the paper into her pocket, stoked the fire, and laid the rifle across the table like another piece of cutlery. "We eat," she said. "We rest. Tomorrow, we build higher." Outside, the wind carried laughter from somewhere it shouldn't have. Across the flats, morning brought chores and a quiet vow. Abigail replaced weak posts, braced gate timbers, and hung small bells on tripwires hidden by tumbleweed. Daniel practiced loading cartridges until his hand stopped shaking. She taught him where to aim, if he ever had to, and how not to when fear lied. Scout slept in the shade, one eye always open. By afternoon, the place sounded different. Wind, water, metal, resolve. She tucked the note beneath a skillet and smiled without mirth. If they came, the ranch would answer first, and loudly. 3 nights later, orange bloomed along the western fence like sunrise gone wrong. Abigail was running before Daniel finished shouting. Flames crawled the rails, popped resin, flung sparks into dry grass. She hauled buckets while Daniel beat fire with soaked burlap. Scout darted, barking fury. Dusty dragged a gate panel to starve the blaze. When it finally coughed itself out, the fence was black lace against the stars. Abigail stood, soaked and smoking, and stared into the dark beyond. Footprints led away toward the road. She memorized the tread, the stride, the cowardice. "All right," she whispered. "Now it's my turn." At sunrise, she rode into Redstone, ash still streaking her shirt. The mercantile hush thickened when she walked in. She bought wire, nails, lamp oil, and said loud enough, "Anyone selling trouble, I'm buying names." No one met her eye. Outside, Deputy Howard found her cinching Dusty's girth. "Heard about your fence," he said. "Got a feeling the judge's old boys are restless." Abigail nodded. "I've got a boy and a dog. I'd like them living." Howard studied her, then tipped his hat. "We'll ride by at dusk." She didn't ask favors, but she'd learned to accept vigilance honestly now. They returned to find Daniel teaching Scout a ridiculous trick with a hat and a carrot. For one clear minute, the ranch sounded only like laughter. Abigail let it heal what it could. Then she set them both to hauling water while she strung fresh wire along the charred posts. Through the afternoon heat, work stitched courage into muscle. By sunset, bells hung again, gates latched tighter, and Dusty nosed her shoulder for praise. "Good," she told them all. Boy, dog, horse, house, stars, pricked on. She left the lamps low and the rifle higher, and slept like someone expecting company. Company arrived at dusk, 2 days later. Not torches, but words. A woman in a calico dress rode up, apron dusted, eyes fierce. "Name's Mary Wilkes," she said. "Used to let men like them speak for me. I'm done." She handed Abigail a bundle. Bandages, coffee, cartridges. "There are others. Quiet ones. You holler, we come." Abigail's throat tightened. "I won't forget." Mary glanced at Daniel on the porch. "Teach him to read the world as well as letters." Then she wheeled her horse and left. Scout wagged at the doorway like a doorman tired of bad guests. For once, Abigail trained at dawn, dust puffing around her boots with each step as she practiced draws, reloads, and calm breathing. Daniel counted under his breath, timing her like a drummer. "Again," she said, and again they worked. Then tools replaced guns. They repaired the windmill, greased the pump, sharpened hose, stacked hay. Work was a prayer here, steady and answered by muscle. By afternoon, a hawk traced circles overhead. She shaded her eyes and smiled. Predators belonged, parasites did not. When night fell, she wrote in her journal, "Fear visited. We gave it coffee and sent it walking, then slept. Trouble returned with thunderheads. A storm should have been blessing, but lightning turned the hills to white knives and set a cedar blazing near the east fence. Abigail, Daniel, and Scout ran with buckets, Dusty dragging wet tarps. They beat flames down, coughing, laughing wild with relief when rain finally pounded the embers flat. Later, in the smoky quiet, hoofbeats approached. Deputy Howard emerged, soaked and grinning. "Heard you were wrestling weather again." He eyed the char and nodded. "Stubborn suits you." He left kerosene, spare matches, and a map marking patrol routes. "Sleep," he said. "We'll circle nights. Here." Weeks stacked like split cedar. Corn tasseled, beans climbed lines, and laughter came easier. Abigail caught herself humming while mending tack. Daniel grew sun-browned and sure-footed, and Scout finally stopped startling at thunder. Yet some evenings, a hush fell that felt unnatural, like the desert holding its breath. She answered by polishing the rifle, checking latches, walking the line until stars thinned the dark. One night she found cigarette ash under the cottonwood, still warm. She ground it with her heel, whispered, "Not today," and kept walking. The ranch, like a body, needed both nourishment and vigilance to thrive. Always. The next attack came clever. A rider cut the lines to the windmill at dusk, then circled toward the barn with a bottle of kerosene stuffed with rag. Abigail's bell sang once. She was running. Her shot snapped the bottle midair. Flames splashed harmlessly across hardpan. The rider wheeled, cursing, and met Deputy Howard's lariat dropping from the cottonwood limb. Daniel whooped, Scout danced, and Dusty stamped, as if conducting the noise. They tied the man, took his knife, and waited while Howard read the new penalties for arson. Abigail didn't gloat. She stacked the shards, then went inside shaking. Sleep came brittle. Abigail dreamed of empty chairs and doors that wouldn't latch. Before dawn, Scout's growl pulled her upright. A lone figure stood at the gate, hat in hand, posture apologetic. "Name's Silas McCrae," he said. "Men you've met worked for me. They're fired." He swallowed. "I came to say I was wrong." Abigail studied him a long time. "Wrong about what, me? Or thinking you were entitled?" He flinched, then nodded. "Both. She didn't invite him in. He left a sack of fence staples and a note with 3 neighboring signatures. If trouble returns, we'll ride." Abigail said nothing. Harvest crept in under blue skies. Abigail and Daniel picked beans into baskets, cut corn, and hung peppers on twine along the porch. The house smelled like smoke and sun-warmed fruit. Dusty dozed between jobs. Scout learned to keep his nose out of drying ristras after one fiery sneeze. At twilight, they ate on the steps, boots off, shoulders touching. Daniel asked, "Think we're still cursed?" Abigail smiled slow. "Curses hate hard work. We're meaner than any curse." Crickets tuned the dark. She felt the ranch settle deeper into her bones, not as a burden, but as belonging, at last. Winter edged in with thin ice on the trough, and breath like banners above Dusty's muzzle. Abigail chinked the cabin walls with clay, stacked wood, and taught Daniel to mend with patience instead of speed. Nights stretched long, but they learned to fill them. Card games, stories, Scout's theatrical snoring. Sometimes the wind pressed hard, testing windows and will alike. She pressed back with stew, blankets, and humor. When storms passed, the world shone scrubbed and forgiving. Watching Daniel carve his initials into a fence rail, she understood. Family wasn't what abandoned you. Family was who stayed and built. Here, spring returned like a long letter finally answered. The well ran sweet, cottonwoods leafed, and calves bucked at shadows. Abigail rode fence with Daniel beside her, teaching him the map written by wind, tracks, water, light. Midway along the south line, they found a cairn toppled by winter. Underneath lay a tin box, sealed with wax, stamped with initials she'd seen in the old barn journal. Inside, seed packets, a dried sprig, and a note. For whoever tries again, this land answers work. Abigail laughed, half sob, half prayer. She pressed the sprig into Daniel's palm, planted it near the porch. They planted it by the porch steps, where water from washing pans would spill. Daniel tended it like a promise, Scout keeping vigil with suspicious sniffs. Days warmed. The sprig greened, budded, then opened small white blossoms that smelled faintly of honey and rain remembered. Neighbors began stopping without pretense, Mary with jars, Howard with news, even Silas with wire, and quiet apologies. Abigail accepted help without surrendering pride. The ranch had become more than hers. It was a hearth others gathered around. At dusk, she touched the blossoms and thought, the past left us a map. We walked it. Home. In summer, water ran lower, but the well kept faith. Abigail taught Daniel to rotate pasture, rest soil, and respect what couldn't be hurried. On Sundays, she let herself be lazy, boots off, feet in the trough while Dusty nosed her hat. Sometimes she wrote letters she never sent, forgiveness folded between pages like pressed flowers. Once, she rode to the ridge where she'd first seen the ruined house. From there, the ranch below looked stubborn and shining. She laughed aloud, startling a jackrabbit. "We did it," she told the wind. The wind for once agreed by going gentle. Homeward. Autumn brought visitors who didn't carry threats. A wandering parson baptized Daniel in the water trough, laughing when Scout tried to be included. A teacher from town asked if the boy might come Saturdays to learn sums and sentences. Abigail traded eggs and hay for lessons. Even the judge who replaced Halston rode by to shake her hand and say, "The law remembered." She believed action more than words, but the gesture mattered. That evening she lit a lantern on the porch, not as a warning, but a welcome. The ranch glowed like a promise kept to itself. At night, years will tell this differently, she thought, sitting on the step with Daniel asleep against her shoulder and Scout snoring like a saw. They'll say a woman tamed a cursed ranch by grit alone. She knew better. The land had met her halfway when she chose to stay, to try, to love. Dusty cropped the grass softly. The blossom by the porch breathed perfume into cooling air. Abigail closed her eyes and felt the country breathe with her. "We're home," she whispered. The word didn't echo. It settled like seed, like truth, like a flag planted without fanfare and defended daily.